Welcome to the Sheffield United Way. My name is Hal. We're going to be talking about Everton and Nottingham Forest being charged with breaching Premier League profitability and sustainability rules. That is the situation. I'm going to come at this assuming that not everyone knows all the information. Everton and Nottingham Forest, both in breach. Toffees have already been charged over a previous breach earlier this season, which they are appealing. Now, imagine if that appeal is successful. That would certainly throw the cat amongst the pigeons. Both clubs, of course, though, could be deducted points. It might be possible that you would see Nottingham Forest deducted maybe 10 points. Let's throw that out there because we saw that with Everton. And then Everton, imagine if they were deducted another 10. So 20 in total. You can see the Premier League table this season currently. Let's just have a look at how that would look if there were to be those, as speculated, 10 points deductions for Forest and Everton. Sheffield United still in the relegation zone, but we will get to the implications for the Blades, and I'll leave that on there for a little while for you to just drink that in. Because if you don't know how this works, clubs are only allowed to record losses of £105 million over a 3-year period, or £35 million a season in that time span. Now, there's some caveats. Investments in youth development, infrastructure, community and women's football can be deducted from these costs. Both these clubs have been referred to an independent commission for alleged breaches of profit and sustainability rules in their accounts for 2022-2023. So it feels like we're in a, if clubs take the risk, they have to accept the consequences situation. Now, I say that because that certainly seems to be the groundswell of public opinion. But what I'd be very interested to know is, what is your opinion? Let me know in the comments, and we will go through these as we kind of go further on, looking at the implications, not just for Everton and Nottingham Forest, but for Sheffield United as well. Now, clubs are in breach of profit and sustainability rules known as PSR, and that's probably how I'll refer to it going on, if their calculation over the relevant period results in a loss in excess of £105 million, as I mentioned earlier, although that threshold is reduced by £22 million for each season a club spends in the Championship over the course of that relevant period. So that, of course, is relevant to Nottingham Forest. Top flight clubs are required now to submit their cash accounts for the previous season by December the 31st. These latest accounts went in on December the 31st. 2 weeks later, here we are. Now, Nottingham Forest spent 2 seasons in the Championship within this 3-year assessment period, meaning the maximum loss for the club is £61 million. Everton have already been deducted 10 points this season for a breach of regulations prior to this one. Could we see a similar or exactly the same amount deducted again? The Toffees said in a statement, Everton Football Club acknowledges the Premier League's decision to refer a breach of profit and sustainability rules, PSR, for the assessment period ending with the 2022-23 season for an independent Premier League commission. This relates to a period which covers seasons 2019-20, 2021, 21-22 and 22-23. It therefore includes financial periods 2019-20, 2021 and 21-22, for which the club has already received a 10-point sanction. The club is currently appealing that sanction. The Premier League does not have guidelines which prevent a club being sanctioned for alleged breaches in financial periods which have already been subject to punishment, unlike other governing bodies, including the EFL. As a result, and because of the Premier League's new commitment to deal with such matters in season, the club is in a position where it has no option but to submit a PSR calculation, which remains subject to change pending the outcome of the appeal. The club must now defend another Premier League complaint, which includes the very same financial periods for which it has already been sanctioned before that appeal has even been heard. Now, Everton's statement continues, but I think you get the idea. They're coming out fighting. A statement from Nottingham Forest read, Nottingham Forest acknowledges the statement from the Premier League confirming that the club has been charged with a breach of the league's profitability and sustainability rules. The club intends to continue to cooperate fully with the Premier League on this matter and are confident of a speedy and fair resolution a shorter, much more succinct statement there. It makes sense to go along and comply with the Premier League. Otherwise, you could be in a Manchester City situation. Manchester City have also been charged with breaking profit and sustainability regulations. That has been ongoing for some time. City were referred to an independent commission in February of 2023 over more than 100 alleged rule breaches between 2009 and 2018, according to Premier League rules. If Manchester City are found guilty of the alleged breaches, then the club faces a possible points deduction or even the threat of expulsion from the Premier League. The Mail reports that the Premier League and Manchester City have agreed to sit in front of an independent panel sometime in late autumn this year. There are suggestions a conclusion to the investigation is not expected until the end of the 2024-25 season. You look at the PSR situation we are currently talking about, and it looks like the authorities have taken the measures that they have done now to actually avoid the long wait that I've just suggested there that we have with Manchester City. So its profit and sustainability rules can be processed quicker and penalties can be handed out or implicated and impact the current season. Well, let's go back to Forest. Since securing promotion from the Championship in May 2022, Forest have spent a reported £250 million on new signings. In September 2022, the club broke the British record for most signings in a single transfer window, welcoming in 21 new arrivals. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. The new charges against Everton arguably couldn't have come at a worse time. They are under a takeover, with owner Farhad Moshiri agreeing in September to sell his 94% stake in the club to American investment fund 777 Partners. According to various reports, 777 haven't changed their stance after, of course, we heard about this news. And 777's teams that they have under their umbrella: Genoa, Standard Liège, Red Star Belgrade, and Vasco da Gama in Brazil. This 777 takeover has been given the okay by the Financial Conduct Authority and the Football Association, but Everton are still, crucially, awaiting approval from the Premier League. Now, another wrinkle to throw into this: The Athletic have reported Everton's potential new owners are facing a lawsuit after an investor started legal proceedings against the Miami-based firm, citing damages of more than $30 million, so £23.6 million, and the Toffees are building a new stadium at Bramley Moor Dock, which they've actually stated will open this year. We'll see. But the timing of this is terrible for Everton. PG Burton on YouTube has said the whole principle of financial fair play is sustainability. Interest payments for a stadium are completely separate from operating cash flow. There's a reason many bankers, investors, and accountants use the financial metric, which is EBITDA, to measure a company's operating performance: interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. They have nothing to do with the business's operating revenues and costs, salaries. So he says, I agree with Everton's appeal and it will be successful. Who knows? But worth noting that the clubs will have until 5 days after the season concludes to submit their arguments. But any final punishments in terms of points will still apply to this current season. Sheffield United could, in theory, be relegated by March, but survive by June. It's football, Jim, but not as we know it. So the way this would work: the 5th of April, hearings must be completed. The 12th of April, decision must be provided. Clubs have 7 days to appeal. 19th of May, Premier League season ends. The 24th of May, the appeals have got to be concluded. So to be clear, any punishment is ratified on the 24th of May. That's 5 days after the end of the season. What punishment will they receive? Well, it'll be disclosed on the 12th of April. By the 12th of April, we will have the points penalty decision, so we'll know. Let's just say it's going to be 10 points for Forest, 10 for Everton. I have no idea what it will be, but let's just say it was. Then the clubs have 7 days to appeal in the time between the 18th of April and the 23rd of May. The Premier League will consider any appeal made in that time frame. These arguments for and against, for a Blades point of view, we need every single advantage that we can make use of. And we know from being in the Premier League before, we often don't get any help at all. It's hard enough to compete in the Premier League anyway. And you've got things like Hawkeye, VAR, handball rules are changed the season after you are relegated. It's frustrating. Blades fan Addison on the popular S2 forum has written this: The biggest fly in the ointment of the Everton decision is that the panel did not set out the reasons as to how they arrived at the figure of 10 points. So no precedent was officially quoted in the public. The only precedent referred to were the previous indiscretions of Mr. Chanseri and the S6 rabble, quoting the principle of points deductions being the correct sanction for breach, hence opening the door to appeal. We now have the scenario before the end of the season. If the timetable is adhered to, Everton appeal to original deduction of 10 points. No date currently set. 14 days thereafter, decision announced. Hearing for Forest, no date confirmed. Hearing for Everton, part 2. Then you've got the hearing to be concluded by the 5th of April. Decisions on the hearing for Forest, the hearing for Everton to be made no later than the 12th of April. 7 days to appeal. Appeal hearings, decisions, legal ramifications to be concluded by the 24th of May. 5 potential hearings. 3 of those appeals, 5 separate decisions, all within a legal framework with the propensity for inconsistent application and further confusion and delay. So that is what has been said on the S2 forum. Thank you, Addison. So, we could face this awkward situation, as I've mentioned, ultimately leading to Sheffield United or any other club in the same situation, potentially taking out legal action over the summer. I mean, let's say Everton were deducted another 10 points now. So 20 for the season, unprecedented. Now, let's have a look at this again, if you missed it. This is what the current table looks like. Let's just go with the 10-point deduction that we've suggested there. Now, they'd be on 7 points, Everton. That's very likely going down. You'd go down after such a huge deduction if that were to happen. And if Nottingham Forest would be on 10 points if they were deducted 10 points again, if Sheffield United, 9 points, we'd be 1 behind Forest, 2 ahead of Everton, who would then be bottom. Although, from what I've read, Forest fans seem to think it'll only be a 6-point deduction on the club statement that, they've come out fairly confident, Forest fans, and could be -6, they think, max, if they breach by, say, 4 million over the limit. As the Everton verdict suggested, -6 for a breach and then 1 point for each 5 million beyond that. But that's a lot of that speculation. They'll hope that by the following through of selling Brennan Johnson to Tottenham, it may be mitigation to reduce the sanctions slightly. But the accounting period is black and white. I've read Forest fans say this. They didn't just miss selling Brennan Johnson by a few days. They missed it by 2 months. Okay, so on Brennan Johnson, Forest got £45 million from Tottenham, but he could have gone to Brentford for £30 million in June. But because that move didn't happen then, and the £45 million move happened in August, Forest can't account for that until the next set of accounts. Had they sold him to Brentford, their accounts would have been 30 million better off, but they'd have been £15 million poorer. We'll also see if this impacts the January transfer window for United. Looks like a quiet one for clubs, perhaps due to these rules. They all knew they were coming. I would imagine other clubs are on the line of breaking profit and sustainability. I mean, there's actually only been one paid-for signing in this January transfer window. Dragosin at Tottenham from Genoa. Others have been loans. Loans with signings then made at the end may become more commonplace. So figures are part of the next financial year. If I was a Luton Town fan with their 16 points, I'd be licking my lips far more than a Sheffield United fan right now, just with the way this is. We're still right in the mire of relegation, no matter what points deductions happen. How do you feel about this, Blades? And clubs fans affected by this? Any football supporter, do you want this to happen in football? Is this, more of the kind of VAR, expanded competitions now getting too far away from the beautiful game we all fell in love with? Or do you embrace these kind of changes? UEFA, of course, have their own financial fair play rules. These rules for the Premier League, EFL, which are clearer, and UEFA will probably be here to stay. They'll probably evolve as football does. But, the game decided on the pitch rather than in the courts after financial calculations have been introduced. It's a far cry from the football I started watching. But worth remembering that all 20 clubs in the Premier League voted for PSR. Yet when breaches occur, it's suddenly a poor system for those in breach. Makes me feel like, developing your own youth for Sheffield United will become even more important. Newcastle are in a position where they need to sell to meet financial fair play regulations. Their turnover is way down compared to Manchester City. Will this actually ironically make Burnley, Luton and ourselves overspend? Because you might think we're now closer to safety. If these penalties are going to come in, they need to come in quickly. I've gone through what could happen there, worst case scenario. I don't like the waiting. Appealing legal arguments, ugly. The not knowing with the implications that has for other clubs like the Blades in the relegation zone. The punishment needs to be transparent. It needs to be consistent for all teams, Manchester City, Chelsea included. Keyword, clarity. Come out and explain exactly why these clubs have been punished, and other clubs can then avoid it. But also the fans would know as well. I'll tell you what, the Championship, that could be really tough next season as well. If these punishments are significant enough to relegate Nottingham Forest and Everton, Forest spend, a lot to try and stay in the Premier League. It worked for one season. Will it actually be what costs them this season? The clubs relegated last season that did abide by the rules whilst Forest stayed up. How do they feel? Let's go to some comments that I've picked. TalkSport's Jake Watson, Leicester fan, has said, whether you agree with financial fair play or not, Moshiri and Marinakis, that's Everton and Forest owners, knew the rules and are trusted with the running of these clubs. They knowingly overspent when they shouldn't have. Fans should direct anger at owners, not the Premier League. Other clubs cut cloth accordingly and were relegated. Leicester, Leeds and Southampton fans. What are they all thinking right now? We've already stated clubs can record a loss of 105 million over a 3-year period. 105 million. And that has been in place, that figure, for like a decade now. And the world, certainly the financial world, has moved on. Alex Crook on TalkSport has said, think about inflation and the wages in the Premier League. I think £105 million is not enough. End quote. Newcastle supporter Kendall Rowan said, if you break the rules, you get punished. That's fair enough. But when those rules are stopping owners from competing and investing as much as other clubs are seemingly getting away with, I understand why it's hard to stomach. End quote. Leeds supporter Joe Wainman, is this a sign of PSR actually working then? Is it not a good thing that finally teams are held to account? Blades fan Roy, from Roy's View From, has said, I'd rather they didn't get points taken off, really. Just looks more embarrassing when Sheffield United still get relegated. I know that sounds unbelievably negative, but even if Forest get 10 points off, we'd still need to better their results to finish above them, and we haven't shown any sign that we can do that. I think what is most annoying is this looks like this would have been a great season to have a crack at staying up. The other two promoted sides are poor, and other teams are getting points knocked off, essentially surrendering before the season started. Looks even worse now. What do you make of it? It's interesting. The rules are there. Everyone knows about them, says Sarah. If you break them, then there should really be a penalty no matter who you are. Do you remember the days when football was just about football? Tell me about it, Gaz. Joseph says, going forward, would like to see any sanctions applied prior to a season starting, as this will affect the team's recruitment and buying power. I think that is a really good point. Everton, I talked about that. The EFL will be significantly different if these happen. It's like I said at the very start. What if Everton are successful with their appeal? Overspending should be penalised. The Prince and his accountants have been very close, but not quite overspent yet. And you know what? It's the not quite overspent yet bit for Sheffield United, which we hope remains the same. If you would like to support us and all that we do and join our Patreon, support the channel, get loads of extra bonus stuff and find out about all the things we're talking about in the background long before it ends up on this channel, patreon.com/Chef United Way. I want to thank all of you for watching. We'll be back next time we're back.